but there are three different ways of experiencing, or aspects of ways of experiencing. But to be honest, it's difficult to put words on. So mano, in my experience, mano is the thinking, rational mind. Chitta is the more the experiential mind that has is where the kilesas dwell. Where there are obscurations that can be cleared, and then the chitta is that which awakens and abides in presence, and then vijnana, as I understand it, is consciousness through the six sense bases, which of course does include mind. So, anyway, let's hear what you've got to say.
It's a beautiful answer, and it really does. It depends on the person who is responding, but they are pretty synonymous. Chitta, vijnana, mano, jit. The Thai equivalent of chitta is much more common. I mean, vinyan in Thai, it means ghost. So it's much less, it's not really used in the same way. So when Mampodun was making that phrase, jit okna, the mind that goes out, he is using this chitta, and jit, the mind, seeing the mind. He's talking about the chitta. And that is the third foundation of mindfulness, chittanupassana, the seeing into anupassana, seeing into the mind, seeing mind. And as we chanted this morning, those 16 steps of breath meditation, the numbers, basically the third set of 4, so 13, 14, 9, 10, 11, and 12 are all, as you were saying, I will breathe in, I will train thus, I will breathe in, knowing the mind, gladdening the mind, concentrating the mind, and releasing the mind. For me, as I was saying, it's that level of just knowing. The English word knowing, awareness is, what I feel most comfortable with, and it is, it can be framed as like a really exalted practice. Dzogchen, kind of this Tibetan framing, in my understanding, is basically talking about the third foundation of mindfulness. And for some people, it's not like a super exalted practice. It's more interesting, it's more accessible than, or at least it's as accessible as the breath. And whatever one is really actually able to tap into, if you're able to actually, when a teacher or you read the Buddha talk about mind knowing mind, if that means something to you and you're not fooling yourself, and we always have to be careful of that, then it's a legitimate way, very legitimate way to practice. So.
Is it helpful for the mind to apologize to the body for its years of abuse? Perhaps. And then you mentioned an exercise involving 2 chairs in your interview with the Ajahns. Can you elaborate? I'm kind of not going to go into that now, because it's unless we were actually going to do the exercise, it's just a bit too much information, I think. But what I can say is, maybe I do have to say a little bit about it. I did do an exercise many years ago that invites the body and mind to have a conversation with each other in an equal way. So it was a practice that a Samanera taught some of us. And in that practice, what I discovered was that the mind was assuming absolute superiority over the body and was very disdainful of the body. And then the body, and it thought it was being kind and gracious in being as It thought it was being kind of gracious, but it actually wasn't at all. And the body was very, very angry. And so the body got to express how angry it was towards the mind and how arrogant the mind was, which was a surprise. I didn't expect that to happen, but the body had an outlet in this exercise. So it got to say what it felt. And so at that time, I definitely didn't apologise. I was a little bit shocked, and then I did some work on bringing that relationship into a better balance, because it was almost like a slave and master. The body was almost treated like a slave rather than like a equal. And so about 20 years later, I did that exercise again, and there was this experience of the mind being quite humbled by the body's wisdom really speaking very clearly. And then the mind did say, sorry, the mind wanted to apologise for being so arrogant. So that was after a lot of work in embodying practices, actually, as we are doing. And really recognising that the body has a lot of wisdom. But the body was very, very peaceful. It was completely okay about death and going back to the earth and things like that. No problem at all. Completely peaceful, totally understood that's what's going to happen. And the mind was like, what about me? What about me? So, So it's good to develop a healthy relationship between body and mind.
Yeah, sometimes I like to think about forgiveness as almost being like a fifth Brahmavihara. So like these divine, boundless mind states, these mature emotions of loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity, and then forgiveness. For me, it has a different flavor to those, but it can be as, if not more, helpful. And for me, it is more of a giving of forgiveness, and it really does dovetail quite well with loving kindness. Is just, forgiveness. I do have, probably most all of us have pretty high expectations for ourselves, and it's like part of the love, part of loving kindness, like to give myself just has to have a huge measure of forgiveness, because I can't live up to what I want to be, and just forgiveness, and just letting that like soften into all of my idealism in the shoulders or wherever it is, and just soft, forgiving. And then what this person asked of like specifically asking for forgiveness, I mean, that's another part of monastic life, is seeing a fault as a fault. Like if we have done something to our body or to someone else, don't try to whitewash everything and just not see, we do bring harm into the world sometimes, and being able to see that accurately and to be able to ask forgiveness and to give forgiveness are really crucial skills. So it's a great question, and I appreciate your answer too.
Is there a Pali word for forgiveness?
There is.
What is it?
It's the same as patience.
Khanti.
Well, Khanti is related to it. Kama, Khama, or kamati is the verb forgive. Yeah. Kamami, I forgive. Kamami bhante. Yeah, I forgive you.
Okay.
The same as patience.
Of course, yeah.
I'm getting a red light, but I
That's
guess you
good.
can hear me.
Yeah.
So also the Anapanasati Sutta talks about the bodily formations. Can you say more about the bodily formations? And if it's not getting too far away from the body, our theme, it also talks about the mental formation. So is there a relationship there between the bodily formations and the mental formations, and maybe even volitional formations?
Yeah, so that's the fourth of those 16 is one trains thus, I will breathe in, breathe out, calming the bodily formations, the kaya samkara. And the eighth is I will breathe in, I will breathe out, calming the mental formations, the chitta sankhara. The ninth is I will breathe in and out, experiencing the mind, just chitta patisamvedi. So chitta, you've got kaya sankhara, chitta sankhara, and just chitta. And my understanding of it is, so volitional formations is oftentimes a translation of sankhara, which is part of those kaya sankhara, chitta sankhara, and is the fourth of the five aggregates, the sankhara. And how I feel it's operating in this sutta is how the mind can interact with the body. So, what influence, so that might be another translation. Other translations of sankhara are patterns, or formations, or volitional activities, or just influence. So I will breathe in, I will breathe out. Influencing or calming this, this influence on the body. Because we can't, the body is not self. I can't just be like, be calm, body. But I can, as we were talking about this morning, you can bend into and incline into calming the bodily formations, and similar with the mind. You can't just, the mind is not self as well. I can't just say, mind, just stop being a tweaker, and relax. So working, samkhara does, it is related to karma, like the work. So it's, working with the body, working with the mind on the level of the mind. Whereas that ninth step of just knowing mind is different in that that's coming back to the subject rather than the object. If you think of that, I will breathe in and out, calming the body, it's almost as if there's a subject, the mind, that's doing that upon the body, or the mind that's doing these mental formations versus mind knowing mind. Sorry if that's inside baseball, a bit too technical for people. But
the technical works for some, and that might be really helpful. I experience it more viscerally. It's like the Kaya Sankara, this bodily formation here. Sitting in meditation, and there's the bodily formation, and just that invitation to calm the body, to bring a sense of calm to the body. And as the body settles and gets less agitated or tense or whatever it may be, then that's also supports the mind to settle. So that they very much work together. You're asking, is there a relationship between the body and mind? Very much so. The body and if the body's very stressed, the mind's also stressed. If the mind's stressed, the body's stressed. So it's starting with this more coarse level of the body and inviting the breath to come through the body, inviting the breath to encourage a sense of calming in the body. And then as the body is calming, then it supports the mind to calm.
okay. So this is, please teach us those 16 body movements, hand, arms for meditation that you did once quickly yesterday. I think I will teach them really quickly, and hopefully you can pick them up very quickly, and would actually suggest it can be a little bit distracting if you do it like inside of a group setting. You can find subtler ways to do the movements, but especially if you're just outside, or if you're in your room, or if you're in the back of the hall, would recommend doing it there, so the movements aren't really distracting anyone else. But 16 moves, so you have your hands on your knees, and you can do it sitting in a chair as well. So with the right hand, which is down on the knee, you go up. That's 1, 2, come up to about heart level. 3, come over to the heart. 4, go down to the dantian or belly. And do the same thing on the opposite side. 5, 6, 7, 8. And now we're going to do the opposite, starting with the right hand. Right hand up to the heart, out to the side, down and back. Left hand up, out to the side, 15 and 16. You can just keep doing it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 8. So that's that, and there you can find it on YouTube as well. Not right now. Don't do it.
Yes, did you have a question?
My question relates to learning through thinking and learning through the body. And you talked about clear seeing or flexible thinking, flexible seeing. It seems like the obvious thing would be that thinking would be the best tool for learning, like learning how to be flexible. We've got learning how to be, especially clear thinking. It seems obvious that that would be so many books, analogies, teachings, everything that you can think about it. But I believe what I think the body has something to say, but I'm wondering why it isn't already known by the mind. Why do we have to work so hard to learn the lessons of the body? Or is it like a more ancient knowing, or why does the mind get it wrong?
Mm-hmm. I think the main problem is that there's not a great dialogue between the body and mind. There's a bit of in the West, there's a bit of a split. And so the mind doesn't listen to the body. And the body, things get a little messy down here, There's a lot of feelings that are not always pleasant, and they can be, they can be tumultuous below the neck. And the intellect can be quite tidy and clear and organized. And so there can be a movement away from the messiness and the sort of more complexity of the body into the more safe and organized intellect. And that's, useful in some situations, but it only works if you need to know the time and place to use that. So when I listed those different kinds of mind, which are the way I learned to discern these different ways of experience, which whether that's actually what they mean or not, I'm not quite sure. But the mano, so there's one like the intellect, the rational, the planning mind, and then there's the more intuitive mind. There's also left and right brains, the hemisphere stuff. That it goes into various areas, but we can learn in a certain way through the rational mind. But there's also a deeper, insightful knowing that can be experienced through more the heart mind, or the intuitive mind, you could say, or the experiential mind. And it's a different level of knowing. So we can have knowledge, pariyatti, knowledge through learning, and then we can have insight, which you can't really get from a book. You might get insight through reading a book, but the insight happens inside you. So there's different levels of understanding. And there's also a certain cultivation that happens, in the practice. So, I've met people who have been practicing for a long time, and then they're late in their years, and they're starting to lose their cognitive faculties. They can't, they've maybe got dementia, or they're forgetful, or whatever. They don't have the sharpness they used to have, but they've cultivated their heart, their chitta. And so there's a brightness and a clarity and a joy that is just radiating from them, even though they can't use their rational mind. So it's a different level of understanding that's much deeper than knowledge. And also I want to say that, the Buddha, in his kindness, does point out these different kinds of people. That there are some people who will find their way into the Dharma through more intellectual knowledge. They need people who need that rational framework and that information, and that will be the doorway for deeper understanding to arise. And then there are others who are more faith-oriented, which doesn't mean they're just sort of blind faith, but it means that there's more of a sort of a trust in the intuitive knowing without all of the details. And they may have a little bit of the teaching and really go deeply into a part of the teaching, like deeply into impermanence or deeply into the Four Noble Truths, or just one little section of the teaching, and that will open up the path for them. And having too much information will be unhelpful for that kind of person, and not having enough information will be unhelpful for those who enter more through the sort of rational, intellectual knowledge door. So there are just different kinds of people, and it works differently for different folks. I'm not sure if I answered everything you asked.
The brain is feeling like it needs to defend itself. JK, just joking. Your words are very well felt, and our grandfather, teacher, Lumpur Cha, like many of the monks in his generation, hardly had any education. I think Lumpur Cha went to grade 4, basically, but he had all these students coming from the West who had all these advanced doctorates, and he had kind of a nice saying that when you start off, if you get your high school diploma, then your kilesa, or your kind of defilement, kilei, kind of the mental imperfections, all the kind of gross stuff, then these kilesa also get their high school diploma. And then when you get a bachelor's, your kilesa get their bachelor's. You get your master's, and your kilesa get their master's, and you get the doctorate. And those kilesas got that doctorate too. So you kind of have to watch out. But as I was saying, there's so many different types of intelligence and feeling into which ones are helpful in which situations, and cultivating those aspects of those ones that are helpful on the path. So, great question.
So, how to let go of emotional pain that is stagnant in the body. Please give me the technique. Only it was so simple. Yeah, how to let go. This is a really interesting question. Well, it really comes back to the Four Noble Truths. So, the problem is pain in the body that is associated with something or other, and we want to get rid of it. So how do I let go? Basically, that's often meaning, how do I get rid of this pain? And that's sort of the problem, is that we want to get rid of something, we reverse, we want to get rid of it. And that very wanting to get rid of kind of keeps it more stuck. So it's a sort of a counterintuitive turning toward the pain. It takes a certain courage to do that, because one has to experience difficult feelings, and sometimes stories come up from the past that are troubling and distressing, and that have been locked into the body for sometimes long periods of time. So one has to, rather than we want to let go of it, but in order to let go, we sort of have to turn towards it and take an interest in it, a kindly interest, a kindly, patient interest in the pain and where it's come from, and maybe what it wants to say. So that's what I do. I ask, what does it want to tell me? And I don't always like what it tells me. Sometimes it's a little bit intense, but it's a good thing to allow. So if you really know that that's an emotional, it's like a pain that's caused through an emotional, something that's happened to you, then to meet it with kindness, with presence, with a sense of, in a way with the awakening factors actually, with sati, presence, and dhammavijaya, curiosity, a sense of like, oh, what is that? What's your story? There is a practice called focusing that was established by Eugene Gendling. There's a tiny little book called Focusing that teaches this technique, and it's where you can, it's a sort of where you bring your attention somewhere in between. It's somewhere in between our normal sort of attentive state and a deeper meditative state. It's somewhere in between those two, where you bring your attention into the body and you allow it to come to us. There's a whole technique to it, but you allow it to come to a certain place that's calling for attention, and then you just basically stay with that, and then you find a word that fits your experience. So if there's a pain or there's a distress, you allow your attention to go there, and you really pay interested attention to it, and then you see what's the word that would fit that just right, that experience. And when you find that word, you give it the right name, it starts to shift, it starts to transform. It's quite a beautiful practice of anatta and anicca, actually. So letting go of emotional pain is carefully turning towards it and asking it what it needs to say. And then you allow it to release in its own time. There's no, come on, I've done this technique, I've done these steps, why aren't you moving along? That doesn't work. You have to use patience and understand that we are a process. What we call me and mine is a process. So it's conditioned, arising, and there's all kinds of conditions that have gone into this, being this way. And some things release easily, and some things just do it in their own time. And some things we need help with. Some things we can't do on our own. So it's an exploration.
How would the Buddha and you, exclamation point, plural, advise us to think about current events that highlight grave injustice or violence in terms of both attitude and action or non-action? Yeah, big question. Well, I do think you are all doing right now something which is very helpful, is stilling the mind and getting some level of mental clarity, some level of remove, some level of detox actually from all the stories. And there's so many stories that we have so easy access to when you've got your phone, and many of them are true. Many of them are true, and many of them are not true. But all these voices just screaming at us, having a level of remove, being able to just not have to be drenching yourself, steeping yourself in this, yet frankly, oftentimes a negativity bath. Oftentimes that can just be a bad habit. Actually, if it is producing some level of quote unquote engagement, But if it's an engagement that feels stulta, it feels like it's not actually onward leading onward leading. This is one of the epithets for the Dhamma, the opanayiko, that which leads inward, that which leads onward. And so you have to take stock as you're watching the news. What is actually onward leading from this? Is this just too much information? Learning about events halfway around the globe, there might be absolutely nothing that we can actionably do about that. And if that's the case, how helpful actually is it to engage with that? And you have to ask yourself these questions and realize your own capacity and the opportunities for you to actually engage in a useful way. And having this opportunity to step out is really useful. And please don't allow the voices in your head that are saying, like, what are you doing? The climate in the world is falling apart in so many different ways, and you're just off on Samish Island watching your breath and trying to be embodied, whatever that means. And it's so easy for those voices to quite cruelly, that's a level of violence, that kind of inner language is a level of violence, which that voice is unfortunately all too willing to inflict upon the other voices of the mind. So that's in terms of attitude, just an attitude of realistic approach, of kindness to ourselves, not a kindness that, if there is something that we can do, a kindness that, just thinks pink. So this is not what metta is. It's not just, slathering the world with, or our ideas of the world with, pretty ideas of how we would like things to be, and that's enough. So, and in terms of whether that results, this wise metta, which realizes our own capacities, and has this real wise kindness, whether you act from that place or don't act from that place, that'll depend on the individual circumstance in so many ways. So the Buddha talked about 7 different types of intelligence, and they kind of rhyme in the Pali, which is fun. So he talked about Dhammanyu, so knowledge of the Dhamma. Talked about Attanyu, A-T-T-H, so knowledge of what's beneficial. Attanyu, A-T-T-A, knowledge of oneself. So this is an intelligence which just knows about your own capacities. Mattanyu, knowing the measure, an intelligence which is like a quantitative intelligence. How much food do you actually need? How much heat do you actually need? How much stuff do you actually need? And all of these have much broader implications, whether you're a monastic, and much more if you've got, don't have all these restricted vows. How much do you actually need? Mattanyu, kalanyu, knowing the time and place. Can I actually do anything about this great cause right now? Is now the time? And when you're on retreat here, now is the time to be with the mind, and to see if you can actually settle into that. Are the voices that are telling you need to go out and be advocating for something? Other voices might suggest that it's not the time for that. And then you've got parisanyu, knowing a group, so a social intelligence, and pugalanyu, so knowing differences between individual people. So these are all different types of intelligence that the Buddha said that we can cultivate and will actually help our Dhamma practices as we relate with the world.
Can you please orient vipassana and insight meditation styles within Buddhism? So, first of all, the Buddha is one of the core teachings of the Buddha is pointing to these 2 qualities of samatha and vipassana in our meditation. So samatha is a concentration practice or collectedness practice, which is where we bring the mind into the absorption states, so into samadhi, collectedness, and then into those deeper states of the jhanas that have been mentioned a little bit on the retreat. So samatha is this collecting and deepening and stilling the mind and bringing it through these beautiful, wholesome states. And it's very strengthening. It strengthens the mind, and it has a certain purification process to it. And oddly enough, in the West, we have somehow separated vipassana and samatha and vipassana. So so vipassana is insight practice. And that is bringing in the reflection on anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. And the way that the teaching is presented in the suttas is more, these two support each other. So there are some who practice samatha first. Some people, it works well to practice samatha, and then to practice vipassana, and that leads to insight. And there are some who practice vipassana and then deepen samatha, and that leads to insight. And they're not two completely separate things. They're different, but they support each other. So Ajahn Chah would say, it's like if you pick up a stick. You pick up one end of the stick, the other end of the stick comes up too. If you pick up the other end of the stick, then the other end of the stick comes up too. So for samatha and vipassana are like two ends of that stick. They're not meant to be, that stick isn't meant to be broken and separated. But oddly enough, in the West, we have sort of done that rather. So you get, well, where's the samatha practitioners? Well, I'm a vipassana practitioner. And what's really needed is the two to come together. And vipassana is because the word has been used, so the Goenka practice, so they use the word vipassana. So sometimes when people say, I'm going on a vipassana retreat, they particularly mean a Goenka retreat, and that's a particular style of practice, a particular technique. Then other people will say, I'm going on a vipassana retreat, and they'll mean that they're, say, part of the IMS, Spirit Rock, kind of, Joseph Goldstein and so on, way of practice. And probably in other parts of the world there's other ways that those words are used. And samatha, there's like whole groups who would refer to themselves as samatha groups. Hopefully they are also practicing vipassana. So the idea is that we actually bring them both together, collecting the mind, deepening strengthening the mind through samatha, and then bringing in the reflection on the truth of the way things are. So if we only practice samatha without vipassana, we may not gain any great insight. So people were doing that before the Buddha was awakened. People were practicing profound states of samadhi and jhanas before the Buddha's awakening. He trained with them and then moved on. And if we try to only do vipassana, just reflect, if it's too dry, then we don't gain any insight. So you need a bit of juice, but also the reflections.
One or two more of that. Okay. Ajahn, please answer. Thanks. Also, sleeping in high places, but need clarity on the beautification precept before taking that one. The specifics are refraining from like wearing jewelry, so we're refraining from jewelry, refraining from scents, so like perfume, refraining from mala, gandha, vilepana, from like makeup, and just other types of beautification. So the English version just says entertainment, beautification, and adornment. The entertainment's singing, dancing, and whatnot. So yeah, just simplifying. Don't know how much else there is to say about that. Hopefully that was encouraging and you're like, yes, I can do all that. Just give up makeup and necklaces and things.
Okay, I'm just going to do this one there. Using the mosquitoes as an example, and trying not to react or kill or think averse thoughts, may you take measures to keep them and you separate? Definitely. Cover, swish away, etc. Yes, you may. How does this translate into other things, events, people that trigger averse thoughts? That's interesting. You can't just whisk away with difficult people. Must you put yourself in situations and learn to tolerate the bite? So you don't have to put yourself into situations. Life presents many, many opportunities. And the mosquito one, it's actually one of the things that the Buddha encouraged us to endure. So there's, basically it's just one of those things in life, getting hot, getting cold, being hungry, being thirsty, having, mosquitoes bite you, or creepy crawlies creeping around. These are just part of life. So the Buddha's encouragement was to endure these things, to endure the touch of, endure the touch of wind, flies, mosquitoes, wind, burning and creeping things, that's right. And it is fine to, you can put a scarf around your head, or, it's fine to use insect repellent or whatever, fine to do that. Boundaries, basically, isn't it? It's about boundaries, so you can do your best to not be eaten alive by mosquitoes, and then endure the fact that it's probably going to get a bite or two. And also with difficult people, it'd be lovely to be able to live in a world where everyone's nice and we all get along and we all understand each other and nobody upsets anyone. Oh, I'd love that. It'd be great. But life isn't really like that, so we learn to endure harsh words if somebody uses harsh words, not to be a doormat, but to just recognise, yes, some people are just going to be like that. And then we're careful, do our best to be around people who are going to bring out the best in us, the good in us, the good qualities, but it's inevitable that there will be people who are difficult. Even for the Buddha. Even the Buddha had, fully enlightened, beautiful, free, radiant, compassionate, wise Buddha had people who would try and frame him and even try to kill him and put him down and so on. So if that happened to the Buddha, of course it's going to, we're not going to be exempt from those things. So learning how to endure and also how to avoid, within reason. So we protect ourselves within reason and use boundaries as best we can, and then there's going to be sometimes difficulties. And the averse thoughts, that's something, so the precepts, those 5 precepts, they limit what we're actually doing. So those precepts aren't saying you mustn't have a bad thought, because well, I won't say because, but the precepts give us a kind of an area within which we've got room to move. So we know we're not going to say something really unskillful, we're not going to do something harmful. But the mind may have those averse thoughts, and then because we know we're not going to actually act on them, then there's a little bit of room to see them, to recognise them. This is the mosquito coming to talk to me now. To see them and to get to know them and to feel the dukkha of them, and then and let that be an incentive to transform them. And it can take some time. But that's the beauty of the precepts. They give us a bit of room to see what's going on, what the mind's doing. They're not so tight that we can't ever have a bad thought. But, oh God, those thoughts are coming up. I just want to kill that mosquito. Maybe that's going on. And then it's like, okay, I want to kill that mosquito. And what if somebody really didn't like me?
Yeah.
And they wanted to kill me? Would that be okay? No. And that mosquito and me, we're different in size, but we're both sentient beings. So it gives a chance to bring more kind of empathy and compassion and understanding through reflection, And then after a while, it's, oh yeah, that mosquito. It's just something we endure, and maybe wish them a good rebirth. I wanted to say just a little story actually about mosquitoes quickly before we end. A senior monk told me one time that he went to visit Ajahn Buddhadasa, who was probably an enlightened monk. He was very highly realized and known as an arahant. And Ajahn Buddhadasa lived. He had a sort of his temple was outside in the woods. So he often had chickens around, and he'd have this cockerel. There was this one particular cockerel that used to sit on his shoulder. And so this monk had come to visit him and pay respects, and was really in awe, Ajahn Buddhadasa, he's an arahant. And so he was sitting there with his chicken on his shoulder, and as he was sitting there, this mosquito came on his bare shoulder and started, sucking his blood. And the monk's sitting there, and then Ajahn Buddhadasa brings his shoulder with the rooster over, and the rooster goes and eats the mosquito. And then he says to the monk, "So what do you think of that?" I thought that was really awesome. Because he's not, it's just nature. It's nature at work. Is there anyone in the hall that wants to ask a question, actually? Yes.
I would like to come back to the Kaya Sankara. There's one place in the suttas where this is defined as in-breath and out-breath. And then when it says, one could substitute this and say, I will breathe in, breathing my in-breath and out-breath, and I will breathe out. And my question is, what would you say about controlling the breath? So there are some teachers who say, you do not control your breath, you just let it come naturally in and out, but there are others who interpret this as you are controlling your breath in order to calm the body and the mind. So, and I would like to hear your take on this.
Thank you. Actually, I was kind of a bit lost track of whose turn it is also. Of whose turn it is to speak first. So, thank you. It's an interesting question. I think the Anapanasati Sutta, there are several things in there that are a little bit unclear, that are not really clear. Whether does it mean this or does it mean that? And some people say it means this, and some people say it means that. And people practice in different ways, interpreting the words in different ways. And I really appreciated the reflection of Venerable Analayo when I was practicing with his teaching on the Anapanasati Sutta when he was teaching in person, where he would point out these places where it's not quite clear. and how we want to know. You know, we like to know, is it this or is it that? How am I supposed to be doing it? Should we do like this or like that? And basically what he was saying was, because we don't know, it's open. It's open to interpretation. So we have a craving to know what is the right way. What did the Buddha mean? And it's quite possible that the Buddha laid it a little bit open like that, so that it can be interpreted in different ways. And in regard to controlling the breath, so for a long time I've been of the view, until recently, I was of the view that you don't control the breath. And I was particularly kind of one of the reasons I felt that was what the Buddha was pointing to was because he practiced breath control before he was enlightened in different ways. So he practiced with the jhanas, which was quite possibly using control of the breath. I don't know actually whether that's true or not. And he also mentions about breath control in his ascetic years. And so he was using control of the breath, and then he had this insight into. Then he had this insight into this memory, of sitting under the rose apple tree and being relaxed and having his mind opening and dropping into the first jhana, where there was no controlling going on at all. And there was just a sense of well-being and relaxing. And then there was that thought, oh, maybe this is the path to awake, to enlightenment. So because of that, I've been pretty. I've landed in the view, let's say, that the Buddha was not teaching to control one's breath, that to not control the breath is the path. But recently, practicing with Ajahn Sucitto briefly, I started to think a little bit differently, and it's like, well, maybe that's also open. And the word control, I feel like to control the breath, it's conditioned, and it's because it's conditioned, it's the result of that is going to be conditioned, it's limited. And I wonder about somewhere in between controlling and not controlling, where there's an intention. So, some of the practices we've been teaching is not to control the breath to be a certain way, but to have a certain intention with the breath, so like an intention of calming with the breath, which is different to not having the intention. The breath is experienced differently. So it's not controlling, but it is influencing the experience of the breath in the body. So basically we don't really know, but what we do know is that what is controlled is conditioned, and what we're looking to understand is the unconditioned. So logically, to me, to control something in order to understand the unconditioned doesn't make sense. But I think it's up for exploration. Are there any more burning questions in the room before we? It's got a good note to end on.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. We do have a few more questions that we didn't get to tonight, but we'll save those for tomorrow. You can add your notes right on top of these, and we might flip it upside down and take these first tomorrow. But we'll have a 10-minute break, and we'll ring the bell. It's about 7:50, so we'll ring the bell just before 8, and we can come back for another sitting period before sharing the merit.